Hey everyone, it's Maya. If you caught me sprinting across the courtyard at the Apex Institute of Eco-Urbanism, you'd probably see a blur of caffeine, fueled focus, and sheer willpower. I'm deep into my third year of biodynamic engineering, which is basically a fancy way of saying I steal nature's best secrets to build better skyscrapers. It's a grueling mix of high-level physics and a weirdly spiritual obsession with how a seashell handles pressure. I've learned to own the room. I'm 5'9" with the broad back of a long-distance rower, and I haven't slouched over a blueprint in years. My hair, a wild forest of dark waves, is usually trapped in a fierce bun held together by a single cedar peg. I treat my physical self like a high-performance machine. I'm a devotee of intense pilates, the kind that makes your core scream and requires total mental silence. I crave that discipline. It reminds me that I can find my breath even when the world feels like it's collapsing. Before I dive into the mess of this past week, I want to check in with you. If you're the kind of soul who finds beauty in the way we break and the way we rebuild, please take a moment to like this and join our community. It keeps this space alive for us. And I have a question for you. When life hits you hard, emotionally or physically, is your first move to vanish into the woods, or do you look for a hand to hold? Are you a hermit or a seeker? Drop it in the comments. Okay, let's go back home. At the Institute, I'm a fortress. I wear heavy work boots, thick denim, and utility vests. I look like I'm ready to scale a crane. But the second I cross the threshold of my family's house, a cantilevered steel and glass structure hanging over a jagged coastal ridge, the armor drops. I have one rule that drives my mentors crazy. I cannot stand a barrier between my feet and the earth. As soon as the front door clicks shut, the boots are kicked off. I'm strictly barefoot in my sanctuary. My feet are size 9.5, wide and toughened by years of movement, and I treat them with total respect. I keep my nails painted a deep, oxidized copper, like weathered pennies. Pacing across those cold slate floors, feeling the shift from the sun-drenched patches to the deep shadows, is how I discharge my static. It's my way of plugging into the source. Lately, though, I've been vibrating at a frequency that's hard to sustain. My life is a chaotic loop of structural stress tests, thermal flow exams, and the looming shadow of my senior thesis. My professor says I have the soul of a poet and the stubbornness of a redwood, which is code for being difficult. To stay sane, I start my mornings with a double espresso and 10 minutes of staring at the fog on the cliffs, wearing oversized silk trousers in deep olive. It's a soft ritual in a hard world, and recently the world got very hard. The atmosphere at home has been brittle. My mother, Clara, is a brilliant but fiery landscape photographer. She remarried 6 years ago to a man named Marcus. Marcus is a lead auditor for a global shipping firm, logical, quiet, and intensely private. He lives in a world of variables and risk mitigation. We've lived under the same roof for 72 months, yet we've functioned like two planets in separate solar systems. We are civil, but we are strangers. That civility snapped last Tuesday. I walked in after a brutal 12-hour design critique, my spirit crushed and my head thumping. I wanted quiet. Instead, I walked into a hurricane. You're measuring the soul right out of this family, Marcus. My mother's voice was sharp enough to cut the glass walls, vibrating with pure exhaustion. I stopped in the hallway, clutching my heavy drafting tube. I'm not measuring souls, Clara. I'm measuring the overhead. We cannot justify a new darkroom wing this season, Marcus answered. His voice was steady, monotone, and completely drained of heat. It's not about the wing. It's about you treating our marriage like a balance sheet. Before I could slip away, my mom burst into the foyer. She looked shattered, her camera bag over one shoulder and her eyes stinging. She grabbed her keys. I can't speak in algorithms right now. I need the road. She snapped, not even seeing me. She shoved past, and the front door slammed with a thud that echoed in my teeth. The silence that followed was heavy as lead. Marcus was leaning against the kitchen counter, staring at a tablet, his posture uncharacteristically slumped. I couldn't handle the tension or the sight of his cracks showing. So, I bolted. I threw on my trail shoes and some thermal gear and headed out the back glass slider toward the ridge trail. I needed to run until my brain went quiet. I pushed myself, the salt air stinging my throat, focusing only on the slap of rubber against dirt and stone. But my mind was back in that kitchen. I was terrified this was the break that wouldn't mend. That lack of focus was my undoing. The ridge trail is a nightmare of loose shale and hidden roots. 2 miles out, as the twilight turned indigo, my right foot caught a shifting rock. My momentum went forward, but my ankle stayed behind. Snap. The sound was sickeningly loud in the quiet woods. A flash of white-hot heat surged up my leg, and I hit the dirt with a sob. I gripped my shin, waiting for the world to stop spinning. It wasn't a fracture. I know the feeling of broken wood, but something vital had stretched too far. The crawl back was a nightmare. It took me 2 hours to navigate what usually takes 20 minutes. By the time I slid through the glass door, I was shivering and soaked in cold sweat. The house was dark except for one lamp. Marcus was sitting by the window, a cup of tea in his hand. He stood up the second he heard the door. Maya. He pushed his glasses up. You're dragging your leg. I tripped. I managed, leaning against the cold glass. The ridge trail. Marcus, it hurts. The man of spreadsheets moved with a speed I didn't know he possessed. The man of stillness became a man of action. Set. The chaise lounge. Keep your weight off it. He helped me into the chair. I collapsed, feeling small and humiliated by the tears I couldn't hold back. I felt like a wounded animal, not the redwood I claimed to be. We need to get the shoe off before the inflammation peaks, he said, his tone shifting to something clinical but weirdly comforting. If the swelling traps your foot in that shoe, we're looking at a different kind of trauma. He pulled over a stool and sat at my feet. I watched, breathless, as he unlaced my muddy runners with incredibly steady fingers. He eased the shoe off, then slowly peeled back the sock. My ankle was already a distorted, purplish mess, the shape lost to a heavy bloom of swelling. My copper-painted toes looked tiny and vulnerable against the bruised skin. Second-degree sprain, possibly worse, he whispered, his eyes scanning the injury like he was auditing a failing bridge. I'm getting the cold compression wraps and the elevation block. Stay still. When he came back, he was a one-man hospital. He'd wrapped the ice in a soft cotton cloth. He placed the foam block perfectly under my calf. And then, he did something that shocked me. You're in shock, he noted, seeing my hands tremble. I'm going to use some light pressure on the arch and mid-foot to keep the circulation moving and prevent a cramp. Is that okay? I nodded, unable to speak. Marcus began to work on the sole of my foot, using rhythmic, deep circles with his thumb, staying far away from the swollen joint. It was grounding. The sheer competence in his hands felt like an anchor. For nearly an hour, we sat in the hum of the house, the only sound my breathing finally slowing down. I'm sorry you had to hear that earlier, he said quietly. It's okay, I whispered. Art versus logic. It's a classic battle, maybe, he sighed. But remember, Maya, the blueprint is solid. We're just dealing with some seasonal expansion and contraction. Expansion and contraction. It was such a nerd way to describe a marriage. It made me laugh, and for a second, the throbbing in my leg faded. For the next 5 days, my mother stayed at a coastal retreat to reset her frequency. It was just Marcus and me in that big glass house. And honestly, it was the most real we'd ever been. We found a new rhythm. I'd work on my laptop from the sofa. Marcus would come home, prep a perfectly balanced dinner, and then attend to my foot. The bruising was stubborn. Every night, he took his place at the foot of the couch, helping me with small stretches and massaging the tension out of my leg. We actually talked. Not about the weather, but about real things. I found out he used to be a volunteer firefighter and that he has a collection of old jazz records he's too shy to play. He learned about my fear of being average, and my dream of building cities that breathe. You have very precise hands, I told him one evening as he checked the bruising. He looked up, a small, genuine smile appearing. And you, Maya, have a very impressive structural integrity. The wall between us was gone. We weren't just a man and his stepdaughter anymore. We were a team. However, by the 6th day, the deep indigo stain near my heel hadn't faded. The pain was deep and nauseating if I even tried to stand. Marcus, I said, looking at my foot under the light. The structure isn't holding. I think I tore something. He leaned in, his face serious. I agree. The healing trajectory has flatlined. You need a scan. I'm calling Clara. It's time for her to come home. He put the call on speaker. I heard his voice, calm, firm, and filled with a quiet authority. He wasn't asking her to come back. He was telling her that her family needed her. When my mom walked through the door 90 minutes later, the energy in the house shifted from static to warmth. She saw the scene, the ice, the journals, the two of us sitting together. Her anger vanished instantly. Oh, Maya, she choked out, dropping her bags and kneeling by my side. She looked at Marcus, her eyes full of something I hadn't seen in a long time. Thank you for being the foundation. We're a 3-point arch. Clara, Marcus said softly, resting a hand on her shoulder. If one point fails, the whole thing comes down. We have to support the load. The trip to the specialist was the first time we'd been in a car together without a thick layer of tension. It was quiet, but it was a safe, shared silence. At the clinic, the MRI confirmed the damage. Partial ligament tear. The doctor said, pointing to the shadows on the screen. You avoided surgery thanks to the immediate care and rest, but you're in a walking boot for 2 months. Then physical therapy. We walked out into the cool night air, Mom on one side, Marcus on the other, literally holding me up. Well, my mom said, unlocking the car. I guess the universe wanted me home. I can't leave my 2 favorite engineers to fix everything themselves. It wouldn't be very efficient without you, Marcus said, and I saw him reach for her hand across the seats. As we drove back to the ridge, watching the moon rise over the ocean, I looked down at the heavy, black plastic boot on my leg. I thought about the irony of my studies. In engineering, we learn that sometimes you have to shore up a building with temporary beams and strip it down to the frame just to make sure it can withstand the next storm. It took a fall in the dark, a sickening snap, and a week of forced stillness to make us stop pretending. It took a torn ligament to knit a family together. My ankle was a mess, sure. But as I watched Marcus and my mom laughing at a bad joke in the front seat, I realized the injury was the exact renovation we needed. Sometimes you have to break a little to see just how strong the foundation really is. Thanks for staying with me tonight. If this hit home, or if you've ever found a silver lining in a moment of pain, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you stay in the loop. Until next time, be kind to your own structural cracks. And maybe, just maybe, take your shoes off and feel where you're standing. Good night.